Hey everyone, this is Emmanuel here. Just wanted to, first of all, I'm just excited for you, for those who have been continuing to listen to our audios and continuing to grow and develop yourselves. And I just honor your spirit, your soul, the hunger that you have. And like I said, we're not we're not the experts. We're not talking to the Dr. Bradley Nelson, but we just wanted to add our input. And so I just want to congratulate you on continuing that. If you've watched these videos so far and you're continuing, just major props to you. You're that 5% of people that just excel everybody else. You're the person that stays in the gym after January and after you make your goals. Most people leave it in February. You're that one that stays in. So keep that up. I know it'll get you really, really far. And so today we are talking about the emotion code, and we are on page 50, and we're talking about trapped emotions in children. And so I've honestly never been this excited about talking about something, just because of all the topics that I've had or talked about. I think the children one is the one that resonates with me the most. The reason why is because I've been when it comes to my own family, they found a journal, and inside this journal I had all these questions like, what is God? What is love? If I don't find these things out, there's no reason to live, things like that, back when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And they hid those things from me because they thought I was melancholic or had some sort of emotional issue. I would always go up in the slide area. We had this little slide near the pool, and I would write haikus. Guys, if you want to freak out your parents, what you want to do is you want to write haikus on a slide, all randomly by yourself with no kids. Or just, I used to get horribly picked on back in school because I was the nice kid. And so here's the thing, is that I was definitely a big worry. Now, if my mother or my father knew about the emotion code, I probably would have gone to an emotion code practitioner, but I didn't. I had to go to a bunch of psychologists, and they really didn't do much for me. I mean, I did feel like I gained a new friend, but for the most part, I still felt the way I felt, which is, just kind of like empty, or like looking for something, and just troubled, and very easily reactive, which means that, I feel something pretty quickly. And so when I start reading about children, I always remind myself, I'm like, or when I see a mother say, this is like actually the most touching thing I've ever had before in regards to the practice, is that when a mother said, hey, I've been feeling a lot of relief. This is probably the first session I meet with the mom or the father, that, I've been feeling so much relief. And do you work with kids? Like, nothing impacts me more, nothing touches my heart more than the parent immediately not thinking about themselves. In fact, I even know a family member a mother who had horrible financial issues, and she refused to work on herself after our first session. And she says, I want to work on every one of our children. And she started seeing beautiful, beautiful results with all her kids. And she left herself last, but she did a little bit of healing, obviously, with the first session, the introductory session, but she was just like, let's not talk about me. My happiness is my kids. And again, we call it, at Coding Alternative, we call it Project One. Project One means a family that's one heart, one mind. And so anyway, let's get to the reading. Let's get to page 50. So let's talk about trapped emotions in children. So it starts off with the story here. I think these are all testimonials, basically, that Dr. Bradley Nelson has witnessed himself personally in his own family. Kind of interesting. And he also talks about other stories from other families. I have twin boys who are, at the time of this writing, 18 years old. One of my early experiences with trapped emotions happened with my son, Rhett, when he was a toddler. Rhett and Drew are fraternal twins and are about as different as two boys can be. Drew was always very affectionate with both my wife and me. Rhett was very affectionate with my wife, Jean, but developed some sort of hang-up around me around age 3. That's pretty early, I'd say. When I would try to hug him or be close to him or snuggle with him, he would push me away and say, bad doctor, away. At first we thought, but he was bright though, he knew he was a doctor. At first we thought he was just passing through some kind of stage. We assumed that he would grow out of it, but his negative feelings toward me persisted for over a year. It was a source of heartache and frustration to me. I didn't understand why my little boy felt this way about me. One evening, Jean and I were sitting and talking together. Rhett was sitting on Jean's lap. I opened my arms to give him a hug. He gave me the same reaction as before, pushing me away and saying, bad doctor, away. This time, I really felt hurt. I really felt the hurt, I could feel the heartache welling up within my chest, and I felt like I was going to cry. My wife said, maybe he has a trapped emotion. Leave it to the wife to bring in the wisdom, right? Up until this point, we had only treated adults for trapped emotions. So we decided to check him and see. Using the emotion code, we found out that he did have a trapped emotion. The emotion was grief, but it wasn't his grief about me. It was actually my grief about him. In other words, at some point he perceived that I had grief about him. He felt that grief strongly enough that it created trapped emotion in his body. Testing showed that his emotion became trapped when my oldest daughter and I had an argument that Rhett was a witness to. So it didn't even have anything to do with him. It's just that he took it on his own. Even though I was not grieved about him, he perceived the grief I was experiencing about her, and then he applied it to himself. Similar to two parents fighting, and then just if the kid's around, they think that maybe the yelling or the anger has to do with them. There's many names for this that I've heard, which is like these projected emotions, or another one's absorbed emotions. That when I work with people, these are definitely things that show up that could be a big cause of either pain in your body or a type of trapped emotion. And so we released the trapped grief, and to my amazement, he walked right over to me and put his arms around me. Seems like he only released one trapped emotion here. As I cried and held my little baby boy, I was astonished and excited at the same time. If my son could be changed so instantly by simply removing a trapped emotion, then how many other children could be helped? I want to share a really quick story in regards to this young boy that came to our practice. Now, obviously, you see that we work from home. That's, as an emotion code practitioner, you don't have to be anywhere. You could actually, work from whatever state, whatever country you live in. But this mother was very, very insistent that I meet with her and she'd come over to our office. So, I obliged and I said, sure, just go ahead and come on down. And so it was kind of exciting because I get to muscle test this person's arm, this child's arm, and push down on his arm and ask questions, yes or no questions, go through the emotion code chart. And basically he came down, and the first time I saw him, he was really quiet. He was very timid, kind of like looking down all the time. And I said, I'm like, what excites you about life? He's like, nah, not much, And I was like, hey, but you're younger than 10 years old. So there's so much more to life you haven't experienced yet, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I'm like, how's JJ? He's like, it's okay. And I noticed just his overall, physical, his posture was, his shoulders were down, his head was low, things like that. And so it's just very interesting that, he came to me that way. Now I started working with him, and we found something at age 9 that happened. And there was like sadness, there was depression, there was all these different things. And I remember almost like it was yesterday. I felt like it was out of a movie, because just the way it was so simultaneous that when I was when I was putting the magnet on his back and going down his back, all of a sudden I saw that he started crying. It was almost simultaneous. The tear went down as the magnet went down his spine. And I remember going like, hey, what's going on? And we had to bring tissue for him. And there were multiple trapped emotions on the same age. And then he basically started crying. He said, this is my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. And I was like, what's your fault? And he says, my dog died. My dog died. It's my fault. And what's really interesting is that the mother was there, and she was listening in, and she said, oh yeah, the dog died, And obviously we're adults, and it doesn't maybe impact us as much as the little kids do. But for the child though, it was his world. Like you can tell that his day became, his day was full of sun, and then it was like darkness, and fog has been there since because of the death of his dog. He further explained, he said that he didn't take care of the dog, so sort of neglect of the dog. And then the dog was given from the mom to, I think, his grandma. And at his grandma's house, there was an accident that happened, I believe, in the street or something. But something happened that was an accident, and the dog died. So he blamed himself, saying, if it wasn't for me not taking care of my dog, that dog would still be alive. And he held that onto him. I mean, just that one free session, that complimentary session, really changed me. I remember how different he was, and his mother actually left me the longest Facebook message and said, he's been better at school, his self-esteem is higher, he's been doing chores around the house, he's been more outspoken, has more self-confidence, his grades are improving. I mean, you name it. It was like this 9 really took him. But later on we worked with his heart wall and things like that. But I just wanted to share that really quick story. So let's keep moving here. So the next thing is the pilot's daughter. So the next day in my clinic, I was talking. We're on page 52. I started on 50. Now we're on 52. The next day in my clinic, I was talking with a patient about what happened with Rhett. She said, I think my little girl might have a trapped emotion. My husband is an airline pilot. Every week he's gone for several days in a row. When he comes back, our 6-year-old daughter will run and hide from him. She just won't have anything to do with him when he comes home from his trips, and it breaks his heart. She brought her daughter to the office the following day. I found that she did have a trapped emotion about her father. In this case, the trapped emotion was sorrow. It was her own sorrow about her father leaving and being gone for long periods of time. At some point, this sorrow was so strong that it imbalanced her body and the emotion became trapped. This emotional energy was exerting a very strong subconscious effect and was influencing her behavior towards him. We released the emotion and they went home. The following week, the mother returned to the office. So this is a week later. Dr. Nelson, your emotional treatment really works. My husband was gone when I came in and had my daughter treated. A few days ago, my husband came home from overseas, and when he opened the door out, a little girl ran and jumped into his arms. She has never done that, ever. He is thrilled. Thank you so much. So I want to kind of share with you this next one. This next one's very interesting. It's called Drew and His Traumatic Delivery. So let's go here. By the time our twin boys were 4 years old, Rhett was very articulate and talkative. Drew was just the opposite, so much so that my wife and I began to grow concerned. At 4 years old, Drew still wasn't speaking in sentences. He rarely said a word, and when he started to speak, he'd often put his hand over his mouth as though he were afraid to say anything. Here's what's really interesting. These are very young children. The first thing that I think about young children is that I also believe, besides working on these, children trapped emotions, like kind of like age 1 to 4 trapped emotions, there's also the prenatal trapped emotions. Then even before there's the premortal existence, which I believe, in the scriptures it says, before thou were in the womb, I knew thee. He was talking to a prophet. The Lord was talking to the prophet. And I believe personally that, and I think Dr. Brad Nelson believes that, we all came from God and we were living with him. And in regards to that we grew to maturity. And so a lot of some of these things you might think that certain behaviors not only come from trapped emotions or prenatal, but it also comes from whatever we were doing. That's the only thing that would make sense that at 5 years old, Beethoven was just as amazing as he was releasing all this information. He was studying music before he came here. There was just people that are very, very gifted, and they brought that talent over from studying it in the premortal existence. Another one too is in the scriptures. If you're more of a Bible scholar, you notice that John the Baptist and Jesus both jump in the womb when Mary and Elizabeth meet each other. Why would they be excited about each other if they've never met each other? They were excited because they recognized who they were. There was a moment of recognition between the one who would baptize the Savior and the Savior himself. And so again, there's just more things like that we can't really, most of us don't even know who we really are. You could be the most valiant spirit that's been out there, and you haven't even scratched the scratch of your potential. So by the time our twin boys were 4 years old, Rhett was very articulate, talkative. Drew was just the opposite, so much that my wife and I began to grow concerned. 4 years old, Drew still wasn't speaking in sentences. He rarely said a word, and when he started to speak, he'd often put his hand over his mouth as though he were afraid to say anything. He seemed fearful in general. When we went to the neighborhood pool, Rhett jumped right in, but Drew stood at the edge looking anxious. He was very cautious about trying new things. He was also claustrophobic. If he went outside to play and the door closed behind him, he would panic and scream. So psychological testing showed that Drew had a high IQ. So his intelligence was very high, but was not developing at the same pace as the norm for other kids his age. Hearing tests showed that his hearing was normal. There seemed to be no explanation for what was going on with Drew. After our experience with Rhett, we decided to see if Drew might have trapped emotions. I love how the fact that Dr. Brad Nelson is kind of slowly accumulating information. I know, for example, we have the Body Code 2.0. I believe he added some new things. So there's the emotion code, there's the body code. The body code 2.0 means that there's more information coming. I believe he really got the full skeletal system there. I think that's what also upgraded it. But I think there's also alterations of the pictures that make it more, eye-pleasing. And so what I love about this work is that, I really feel it's heavenly inspired in so many ways. And I really feel that, of course, it would make sense that Dr. Brad Nelson continues to bring out new programs or new things because I don't think heaven stops talking. I think there's still more information that we could learn about ourselves, our body, our relationships, our wealth. And so there's other things happening. Like there's a relationship resonance program that just recently came out. Then there's the wealth program that also came out too. So there's the emotion code, body code, relationship resonance, wealth program. So there's just a lot of things that are happening energetically between us, and we haven't even started. I think there's more things to come. So after our experience with Rhett, okay, so as we tested him, we quickly found a number of trapped emotions that were the result of traumatic things that happened on the day that he was born and shortly thereafter. Jean's labor and delivery had been very long, lasting 22 hours total. Rhett was born first. He looked beautiful and content and immediately went to sleep. Drew was born 14 minutes later, emerged blue and limp, looking really rough. A team of doctors circled around him immediately. They weren't sure he would make it. The situation was critical. He pulled through, but the next 10 days or so continued to be very traumatic. We had taken both of the boys home when they were a couple of days old, but Drew had to be readmitted to the hospital for testing to see what was wrong. He was unable to keep any breast milk down and was rapidly losing weight. We were told that he had picked up a life-threatening infection during his first few days. The doctors had to do a spinal tap on his tiny body. That's terrible. And administer antibiotics intravenously to save his life. So this is a very tough crash landing for a baby. I mean, he obviously survived, but this is what we're about to find out is that this wasn't just there is something that got stuck with him during that time, and that's what we're about to find out now. Against our wishes, Jean and I were ordered out of the room as this procedure was begun. We were unable to comfort him in any way, could only listen helplessly as Drew screamed in terror while they repeatedly tried to insert the needles into his tiny veins into his spine. We didn't dwell on Drew's traumatic experiences ourselves. We never discussed these events with him as a child. It was very upsetting for us to even think about it. 4 years later, as far as we know, he had no memory of these events, but he did have a lot of fear about a lot of things. One by one, we found and released the trapped emotions that related to these traumatic events. We were amazed by what Drew had perceived as an infant, and how deeply it had scarred him emotionally. He probably expected that coming into the world would be wonderful. Instead, he came into an incredibly painful situation that could scarcely cope with. It was like being born into hell. It's a great description. As you might imagine, he had trapped emotions of fear, terror, and abandonment. Those are all trapped emotions in the emotion code chart. Undoubtedly, these were the exact feelings he had during the emergency room procedures that we all found so difficult to endure. Drew had also developed a trapped emotion of panic while he was in the womb, waiting in line behind his wet brother. I haven't really seen too much panic in our practice. I think panic comes during like car accidents or these birth issues. I've also seen them, unfortunately, with sexual abuse and physical abuse. Panic or horror will usually show up. In addition, he had a trapped emotion of anger that he had inherited from his grandfather. It was actually that inherited anger that was making him reluctant to talk. He was afraid that he would hurt someone with his words, which explains why he would always cover his mouth when he would speak. We released all these trapped emotions and retired for the night. Here we go. Ready for the results? The next morning at breakfast, we couldn't believe the difference. Drew was like a little chatterbox. Suddenly, and for the first time in his life, he was speaking in complete sentences. Without the trapped emotions keeping him attached to the traumas of the past, he was able to let go of his fears. His claustrophobia vanished along with his fearful attitude. He was free to become bright, happy, and inquisitive. So that's a great story. We're going to end right there on page 56. And so we just read page 50 to 55 or 56 with the emotion code. So we're going to continue with Karsten, who's going to be reading the next 5 pages. And so we want to thank you again for reading with us. Hopefully you gained some insight in this subject. And like I said, I've worked with one of my favorite I'll leave with this, one of my favorite people that I worked with, just caused a lot of family turmoil. If you're out there and you're watching this right now and you happen to be watching this one, is there hope with the emotion code with your children? I actually made another video. I think it's called Hope for Children, and I think it has to, and that's exactly what I talked about. I talk about testimonials, kind of stories about children. Now, here's the one thing is that there's this one child that we're working with, and just the mother was just so let down, so just sad, and just like we've talked to every therapist, we've done everything. And we can tell that she was broken. Her husband was also suffering with resentment, and something happened. I continued to work with this child, and there he was. Someone emerged from him. Number one, he started saying after a while when I started clearing his heart wall was, "Hey mom, I've been feeling really happy. I don't know why." It really touched. We haven't told. See, one of the things I love about working with children, you don't have to tell the child who's under 18 years old that we're working with him. You could just basically work via proxy, where I work with the mother or the father. That's one of the most unique things about the emotion code. I actually don't like telling the children at all that we're working with them, because I believe it leaves something in the psyche, And unless they're open to it, but I mean, for the most part, most people are programmed negative, and they can think negative about like something's wrong with me. My mother thinks something wrong with me, so we kept it a secret from him, and we saw his changes. So there's no placebo effect for those who are very skeptical. There is no placebo effect because obviously the mother didn't say anything to him, and we saw so many differences. And so, but he said I started feeling happy again. His grades improved. When his mother was trying to kind of reach him and console him for something, he kind of snapped back at her. Then the mom got emotional, and then he was actually sorry, and he got emotional, which never happens. Like, he was usually a pretty stone cold hearted guy, but little kid. But for the first time, the mother started seeing that he actually does feel pain when the parents feel pain. And so those are just one of like 3 or 4 of the different examples of changes that even a child who's been super lost, very jaded, very controlling, very angry, very frustrated could still come back with the emotion code. So what you want to do is you want to, if you have any questions or any comments below, we'll definitely respond pretty quickly. And also, you definitely want to press the little bell button down there. That'll actually give you the notification that we actually create a new video. We're trying to make 5 videos a week. And so if you're really interested in like learning more about the emotion code, you're a very serious student, I would definitely not only subscribe, but also press that bell down there, and that bell will actually alert you every single time we make a video, so you'll be the first to know. So with that, wish you guys the best. Feel free to comment below. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys with Carson in the next chapters. Take care.